Thank you, Miami, for the last 3 years in this amazing city. The whole world shut down, but Miami welcomed us with open arms. We want to show Bitcoin to the whole world. We are taking the conference on the road to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. Nashville. Bitcoin 2024 is coming to Nashville in Tennessee, a city that is known as a music and freedom city. Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville from July 25th to 27th.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to FedWatch, your home for Bitcoin and macro with a little contrarian twist. Today, we're going to cover the Grayscale stuff, the court case that they won against the SEC, a bunch of ETF stuff, Bitcoin price, Jackson Hole and Fed, PCE inflation indications or numbers just came out. German economy is imploding as we speak. We got a big story on that. African coups. I mean, it seems like all sorts of things are happening in Bitcoin and macro right now. Let me bring on my co-host, Nolan Bauerle. How are you doing today, man?
I love life, and I'm coming at you in some kind of lower resolution because I'm broadcasting from my Starlink. And I think all the legal hangups that Elon had this week by the action that he has against the glass house situation. You know, he's getting investigated at Tesla for the glass house project. And then he's also got the other, it looks like criminal activity that he didn't allow refugees to be hired in the rockets that they were making. So my Starlink is not working great. So they got troubles over there. I think they're diverting some money.
Is it affected by cloud cover? Because we just had the hurricane come through, and you guys might be getting some after effects of that.
No, it's exactly what it is. Yeah, it's all cloud cover. Although it was yesterday. Today is as blue a sky as you will see. It is cool and crisp. We were not 40 degrees this morning, so there's something else coming. Well, you drag down all the heat when you get that kind of those big systems, right? They actually make it cooler, so it sucks so much air down that we end up getting some of the northern stuff. So we woke up to like a 40, low 40s this morning. Low 40s. It's already back up to, we're closing in on 80 today. We're gonna have a nice hot day.
Well, we're almost in September. The summer is drawing to an end here. September 1st is our big day for the ETFs. We're going to definitely talk about what we expect coming up tomorrow on the big announcement day. But before that, do you have any more plugs up front? Do you want to talk about Amsterdam before we jump into this?
Indeed, I do. I would like to invite everyone to Amsterdam, October 12th and 13th. I just got off. I'm gonna pique your curiosity. I'm not gonna say the name, but we have an amazing speaker that just reached out. 2 speakers actually that just reached out, and they're gonna be great. So I can't say the name yet, but they're gonna get us in the center of attention anyway, I think. So looking forward to being at the center of attention, October 12th and 13th. We're going to be talking about how great the Europeans got the energy policies. We're going to talk about it on our show today. You're going to hear all about it in Amsterdam. Of course, we are going to be dunking on the know-it-all energy policies of European governments over the past few years, basically starting to help make that case of why you should separate government from money in the first place. Energy is going to be the big wedge, and you're going to have a lot of content there. You're going to hear all about how the deputized banking system is never going to be able to create the kind of energy that we need, and how Bitcoin is involved in all of that. So it'll be a good show. And if you want to hear any, times we pump that show, that's my show every morning, The Breakup, at 8 a.m. Eastern time, where we talk about all this kind of stuff too. And we talk a lot about the speakers, and sometimes you get a little hint about who's coming. Right?
Yeah, well, you guys had some great guests down there in Miami this year. I think you over delivered down there in Miami, especially on the political front. We do have a political tweet embedded in our slides today, so we will cover that. But yeah, looking forward to Amsterdam. I am not going, but I will definitely be watching any live streams that you guys have. So, all right. And my plug, bitcoinandmarkets.com. That's my own podcast. I cover all of these topics with a little bit less emphasis on the central banks and a little bit more on Bitcoin and monetary matters. But okay, let's jump into the slides here. This is the daily chart, and that red line is the September 1st deadline, which is tomorrow. And with the pump from the Grayscale thing that just came out this week, we jumped over the 200-day moving average. I said, oh yeah, baby, we're on fire here, ready to hit September 1st. And now we have fallen back below the 200-day, not looking strong whatsoever. We didn't even get to the 50-day to be rejected. We fell before that. So that is looking very weak to me. If we go to the next slide, that is the weekly chart. And the 200 week and the 200 day are pretty close to each other here. And we got rejected from the 200 week as well. So overall, this little rally that we've had since the Grayscale news is not looking very strong, which tells me that, or lets me believe that tomorrow is probably going to be delay, and we probably have a few more weeks of downward price movement before we turn around. Any comments on the price chart here, Nolan?
No, that one really did surprise me what happened this week. Of course, it's one of those weird things where even though we knew this legally was coming, if you spent too much time looking at the law, right, or what was actually being challenged, you had too much detail in that you knew that it wasn't going to be an ETF automatically. It was really just a do-over. So sometimes you get punished for looking too closely and following the law too much, because this did create that sentiment that this was a reality, that we were heading into a verified ETF world, which I think it does indicate, right? I think it does indicate. We're going to be talking more about that, so I don't want to spoil too much of my opinion on it. But yeah, it was a big surprise. The downward spike here as well that we experienced yesterday also sort of surprised me. You know, I didn't see either of them coming, which makes me think exactly that. It was just this weird little occasion, a couple of active people, and this is the result.
Yeah, well, in the military, in the Air Force, we call that having your head down in the cockpit and not looking out, right? You're too much in the weeds, looking at all the metrics and all the statistics, and you're not like looking at the bigger picture. So yeah, that's a great point. I don't have anything else on the price other than talking about what I expect in coming weeks after this decision tomorrow. So let's go on to our big segment, dun, 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 ETF watch. So this is our just image that we've showed the last couple weeks of all the deadlines, what the second deadline and third deadline could be, all the way out to the final deadline out there in March for these ETFs. At the top there, I say Grayscale wins, paving way for approval. So yeah, this is what's coming up. Any comments on this one, or should we roll into a video of the Grayscale CEO talking about what happened? Uh-oh, we got some lag, I think, on Nolan here. Let's roll. Is he going to try to jump back in? Chris, how about we roll that video from, I think his name is Sonnenschein. He's the CEO of Grayscale, talking on financial media. Let's go.
now after the U.S. court sort of gave you some runway to be able to launch a spot Bitcoin ETF. What do you do now?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. Let's be clear about yesterday. So yesterday was the culmination of more than a year worth of litigation. The SEC denied GBTC's conversion to an ETF. We immediately filed a lawsuit. 14 months later now, we finally got a decision from the DC Circuit, and a panel of 3 judges unanimously voted and agreed with Grayscale, and that actually vacates the SEC denial order. Huge win for Grayscale, huge win for our investors, and really the crypto and investment community as a whole.
But there's a process here to the point that you're making, and there is a chance that the SEC looks to broaden this out, potentially fight the decision, bring this in front of a larger array of judges. And so if you're thinking about that potential process ahead, do you have any concerns that the race to bring an ETF to the market will leave you behind?
Well, so today is day 1 of a 45-day period during which the SEC has the ability to request a rehearing. Ultimately, at the end of that 45-day process, you could expect a final mandate from the court with operational next steps. Now, of course, in the interim, our attorneys are going to be working proactively with the SEC to try and make this conversion as expeditious as possible. But we really do need to ensure during this period we're adhering to the federal rules of the appellate court.
Do you need to refile for an ETF? And if you do need to refile or amend, are there certain things that you would add, such as a surveillance sharing agreement? Do you worry that the ones that already have one have a competitive advantage to your filing?
Well, so the operational next steps on anything that Grayscale will or won't have to do will be contained in that final mandate that comes out of the court. But one of the interesting things that we actually got from the court in yesterday's decision was that the court agreed with us that the arguments we've been putting forward all along throughout this process are such that the SEC already has the tools it needs to approve spot Bitcoin products like GBTC, that there is sufficient surveillance between the CME, where Bitcoin futures trade, and national securities exchanges like the New York Stock Exchange, where we intend to list GBTC as an ETF. So there really shouldn't be any further grounds like the SEC has been relying on to continue denying these types of products from coming to market.
All right. So the takeaways there I have is a 45-day window now that the SEC has to respond to this. In that response, they will be telling Grayscale what they expect or what they want in order to go through with turning GBTC into an ETF. One thing I think is interesting is the 45-day length will coincide, will sync up Grayscale with all of these things tomorrow. If those things tomorrow are delayed, there will only be a 2-day difference in that 45-day window, right? So, yeah, what are your thoughts, Nolan, on what you heard there?
Oh, there you go. Okay, back. Sorry about
Gotcha.
these technical problems. Yeah. So that was Michael Sonnenschein. I did work with Michael Sonnenschein in a sense because the parent company when I used to work for CoinDesk was related to GBTC. So I actually spent a lot of social time with him and have gotten to know him over time. He's been after this for years, right? This has been his main job to get this thing. So now that he's at the sort of finish line, you can tell that he's got it sort of scoped out and mapped out. Because again, what I understand will happen is if he gets this, the entire gap which exists currently between the trust and the premium people have to pay to get it, right? The convertibility is not market rate right now at all. It's like 40% gap or something like that. This closes immediately. So that's something you want to be able to that's sort of the future of the business right there, right? So you can tell there's not just a lot of forethought put in this. This has been sort of singular on their mind for years. But what it tells me as well, and I think this remains one of the bigger subjects here, is just how incompetent the SEC was shown to be in its handling of this stuff. But really, right? He's been saying it for years. Now we have this huge delta here. Now, look, I'm not here to say. I want to express already firsthand that I had this personal connection, because I'm not trying to say that there's manipulation here, but who's benefiting from this ridiculous situation, right? Like they suffer, and it sort of erased their entire head start on their good idea, which they had enjoyed. They were the only dealer of fake Bitcoin to Wall Street
Derivative, yeah,
for 7 years. Right? They had a monopoly, and now they got the entire advantage clawed back by who? We don't know, but something's up. Doesn't look cool, all right? Looks ridiculous. I mean,
Well,
it looks ridiculous.
You're saying that they were waiting for someone else to file application for ETF?
No. I'm saying that so the delta goes away overnight, right? If it converts, so they don't have this anymore. I don't think this is something they wanted. This was a psychological condition of headwinds, of industry having trouble, of their own liquidity troubles that they fell into, right? None of that. I'm not trying to excuse away any of that, right? That seems like a bunch of mistakes and terrible management and problems, which probably weren't Grayscale's fault to begin with, right? The whole thing, just from where I sit, I could see where mistakes were made, right? So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the advantage of delaying it for the crazy reasons that the SEC adjudicators gave in the first place, and how you have now an actual court, right? An actual court, not a fake court, right? Because the SEC is a fake court.
Yeah.
And not only is it a fake court, I say it, I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. There's an actual pending Supreme Court case where they're going to be looking at all of these quasi-judicial bodies that sit inside of administrators, because it is the very opposite of the definition of the separation of powers, right? We're seeing that this need, right? One of the things that Nick Carter tweeted about in relation to this exact case is that the federal courts are one of the last bulwarks against the tyranny of department three-letter bodies like the FBI or CIA, or in this case SEC, right? There's no reason why they are both the police and the judge, right? There's no reason that they're out there catching people and adjudicating. And I've said for a long time, it's been one of my main issues with Wall Street for years, is that the complexity of securities law became so estranged from reality and so complex that some lawyers believe that being a securities lawyer is like brain surgery. It doesn't have to be this way, right? It never had to be that way. It became that way because you got so specialized. And the entire case that's going to the Supreme Court is based around that idea that a basic court should be able to treat securities law without a specialization in securities law. It should never become so specialized that no lay lawyer, we're not talking about lay people, no lay lawyer, like a normal lawyer or judge should be able to understand the law. And we don't live in that world now. We do not, right? We don't live in that world as it is. And that's kind of what this judgment said. This judgment said that you didn't apply the basic principles of legal thinking. This is purely driven by your own blatant self-interest on the part of the SEC. So I'm putting the onus here on the SEC, right, as the guilty party. The same guys that are going after Elon for the glass house now, right? Who benefited from this? That's all I'm saying. Like, I don't want to say anything else besides this, but we know other people have ETFs, and now suddenly theirs looks like just a beautiful bouquet of credibility.
Yeah.
They're brand new.
Yeah, I think some of it can't, like, from my vantage point, I see that the banks really didn't want Bitcoin. They really felt threatened by Bitcoin until just a little while ago. I think maybe 6 months to a year ago, they stopped feeling threatened, and they actually think that maybe it is a competitive advantage to let Bitcoin into the US. So I think there is some of that where they were under an older paradigm. Now everybody, the power structure has actually greenlit Bitcoin, but the SEC was kind of caught in the middle with this. How do they greenlight Bitcoin, but at the same time not greenlight all the scams, And so I think that's how I look at this. But I wanted to touch on a few things that you said there as well about the technical debt. So the SEC, you're saying, has built up all this technical debt. So it's how we test is really simple, right? But now over the years, they've continue to expand the regulatory, every year they probably add a bunch of regulations on there that make it harder and harder to understand. So am I interpreting what you said there correctly?
Yeah, that's more or less it. It's not even that. It's the amount of one-offs, carve-outs, exceptions to the rule. It mirrors what in FX or macro as financial engineering. Like there is an ancillary world to financial engineering that not really. Well, yeah, if you securitize some forms of commodity trading, then that's what happens. But yeah, it's from that world, right? It is the rehypothecation. It's everything that goes along with these things, right? Not just that. It's everything that would be implicit within prime brokerage and the padded glove experience that became in order to better serve up and glamorize the financial engineering that backed all of this. The back end of that, right? The literal back end of it was this completely captured regulatory body. Yeah. So now that you can see the divergence, like to me, they can bring what you have here to the Supreme Court for, I think it's the Jarush or Jarmusch. I can't remember the actual name of the case. I was trying to find it just before. I should have had it beforehand, but you can find it, right? It's out there, and it's sort of current. There's some fake news articles on it about how if this plan goes through, 70% of the federal government was unconstitutional, right? And everyone laughed at it, but everyone's like, yeah. There's like a bunch of Chad memes, like, yes, that's what we're saying. Yes, exactly. I've said that for years, and that it's actually happening now to me was, as someone who studied constitutional law, this was obvious to me from the beginning. It was clear that securities law had become corrupted because it was too complicated. You couldn't even as a lawyer figure it out, right? It was too much.
Well, let's dive into some of their actual reasonings that came out from this district court. They said that the futures and spot ETFs, they should not be treated differently. Futures get their pricing from from the spot markets. So why would a spot ETF be any different than a futures ETF? They also have 2x futures. So that's what I was saying for months and months now, is that if we have all of these futures ETFs, there is no reason that there should be no spot ETF. And that is pretty much exactly what the court came down with. So any thoughts on their reasoning behind it? Do you agree with that?
Well, it sounds exactly like Crypto Mom. What was her name again? Hester, right? Hester
Pierce, yeah.
And because it sounds like her, you knew she was already speaking the distressed, like, I'm a hostage language of bureaucracy to begin with, right? She was already saying things like, we have no reason. We can't explain it. They couldn't explain it to me. You know what no explanation means? It's corruption. I'll take any explanation. If someone is willing to lie in public, that's almost good enough. Like if it's just a lie and you can back it up, sort of, I would accept it. I wouldn't say corruption. But if they can't even do a lie, like if you can't even come up
with a plausible lie,
like a story, like you couldn't have given Hester Pierce talking points. You couldn't have done her that favor. You know what I mean? And of course they couldn't, right? They couldn't be bothered with giving Hester Pierce talking points so that she could save face and not say this thing is totally corrupt. So she was already speaking the language of a distressed, kidnapped hostage when she would say things like, they can't explain it to me. So to see another court say it clearly about an entire institution, again, that to me is proof of corruption. I don't need to see more. The whole standard of innocent until proven guilty, that only applies to us as people. Like, it doesn't apply to like institutions. They're the opposites. The government is the opposite of people. They're guilty all the time. And if they say nothing, then they're absolutely guilty. And they have to prove they're not, right? That the burden is reversed. And in this case, they've never even come close. So I look forward to this. I look forward to these developments.
So what does this mean for the coming ETFs tomorrow? We have some updated odds by the Bloomberg ETF team. If we go to the next slide, we can see this is Eric Balkunis. He's head of strategy there at the ETF team. Producer Chris, if we get the next slide. There we go. Perfect. So he says that they are updating their odds to 75% of a spot Bitcoin ETF by the end of this year and 95% by the end of 2024. While we factored Grayscale win into our previous 65% odds, the unanimity, I can't say that
Unanimity.
Unanimity. Decisiveness of the ruling beyond expectations and leaves the SEC with a very little wiggle room. So yeah, it was 3-0 on this panel of judges. It wasn't like a 2-1, it was a 3-0, and they used very strong language. So it wasn't like they were waffling at all. So yeah, it was a very strong decision, and they're updating their odds to 75%. If we go to the next slide, Nolan, you can stop me whenever.
Yeah, even just as insight. So one summer, I played on a baseball team of judges. Like I was a ringer for them, because I knew a guy who was clerking at the court, and I was good at baseball, so I was the ringer, right? Went in for a couple games, smacked some home runs. It was great. But even then, I was talking about this kind of stuff with those folks, and I can tell you right now, just guessing, like I haven't referred this to them, but there are judges out there like these ones that are had enough of people like these when they see this type of corruption. And they understand these legal principles. That's why you're seeing a unanimity of a 3-0 like this from a federal court to this kind of court and that kind of language, because they want that territory back, just even so that they can mentally map it. It would be like saying, you don't understand the mechanics of this car. You can't serve any of these types of cars, and you're a mechanic, and like just out of pride, you'd be like, no, like I can fix.
Got to take it to the dealer.
Yeah, like I can fix a BMW and a Toyota, like whatever. Right now, I don't mean to make it all analogy, but I just want to.
You're cutting out.
Yeah, judges out there that want to do this.
Understood. Yeah, I think you are. That makes sense when you put it like that. I do think that makes sense, that the district courts, which this is the level of court under the Supreme Court, one under the Supreme Court, and so being 3-0, that says something huge. That means that there was some titanic misunderstanding between the SEC and these top level judges, which is pretty fascinating. If we go to the next slide, this is Eric Balkunas again, and he says that, man, they're starting to cover this ETF decision on mainstream media. And he says he hasn't, he's only seen it like once in 7 years. So this is a huge deal. I would say it's probably bigger than the gold ETF launch when that was. I doubt that was covered on the mainstream financial press. But this, just a one court decision on the way to a spot Bitcoin ETF, is getting all of these headlines. If you go to the next slide, this will show you how many headlines they actually got. You can see the New York Times, CNN, AP, Wall Street Journal, New York Post, Forbes, all had stories covering this. Again, first time in 7 years that Eric Balkunas has seen anything like this. What are your thoughts on the mainstream media coverage, Nolan?
Yeah, I was breaking up a little, making sure I'm coming in clear. Yeah, there. Breaking up a little, making sure I'm coming in. Comes in cycles. I think this is great, and I think it's exactly what Bitcoiners have predicted in a very nuanced way, right? Because you have this whole conversation, political conversation now about backing the US dollar with Bitcoin. And now suddenly you see institutional corruption, similar to what we see in the wider corruption of courts by politics and all that. I'm thinking of the stuff you're seeing in Georgia, the stuff you're seeing in Florida, the stuff you're seeing in New York, right? All of that stuff. So you're seeing, and even the stuff with Elon today, right? America sort of almost signaling that there's a big change coming to how we administer our legal system, because we kind of have to, right? Like to much of the world, we're throwing out our most valuable asset. You can say it's the oil. I don't think it's the oil. I think it's the credibility of our institutions, as Jerome Powell has said about the US dollar. So, that the rule of law and blah, blah, blah is why people choose it. And it's true. Like, I don't even care who's in charge of the United States. If our systems are unpredictable, the whole thing is over. And they became unpredictable over time. They became weaponized and mutilated. But that the seeds of correction are right in front of us, and that it's weirdly for the entire SEC, Bitcoin, not even really under their jurisdiction, that just through this weird conversion of immaterial Bitcoin, and somehow that has created this situation where indeed the entire system is relying on what did he say? That wasn't part of their calculus, right? The untenable, politically untenable, that it wasn't part of what they'd even. It's completely against the plan, because the plan is that no one will care. And it's true. That is really the main obstacle that Bitcoiners have, that people who want to, revolutionize the American systems these days, that's the only real thing that can stop it, is the apathy of people who go, I don't know what's going on, right? I don't know. And indeed, we don't need everyone to know. We don't need a bunch of civic minded people, but that it's this big, that it's the biggest ETF, and ETFs are the biggest thing as it is. And then we're, it's perfect. It's 2024. The 2024, the way we could have dreamed 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You make some great points. You made me think of, like, big shifts happen slowly. So it's not like one day they're going to come out and everything is going to be overruled. You have to chip away at it. And the US, and I would say, like, even large countries or large entities like the EU, political change is not a sports car where you can just change. It's a big container ship that takes a long time to turn. So I think what we're seeing here is the turning of the ship away from the direction we were going on, the way Davos was taking us down this road. And in the story on Germany here late in a couple minutes, we'll see that the sentiment has changed dramatically overnight. And now it's going to take a long time for the ship to turn, but the ship is turning. Let's go on to a couple more tweets, because I thought these were interesting. So he's talking about deadlines coming up tomorrow. He wouldn't be surprised if the SEC delays, given the rulings just happened. That said, not sure timelines will matter much in this situation. Probably more likely we wake up one day and hear the SEC is given in and launch is imminent. I also said that the Grayscale 45-day window now will match up very closely within 2 days to this delay, if they delay and they get 45 more days. So that is kind of the stars aligning a little bit on the delay. But then if you go to the next slide, I just took this from James Seifert. He's also on the Bloomberg ETF team. A little vote from his audience, about 1,000 votes, and 75% are voting for a delay tomorrow. Do you have any comments on that? I have one more ETF slide.
Yeah, I feel like delay is sort of in the cards. This is one of those Fridays in America where the least amount of people are paying attention. So you'd be the most courageous to give bad news.
Labor Day, yeah.
So it is a holiday, right? And it's a pretty significant, like, end of summer type of holiday. So it's you can count on people stuck in traffic and traveling tomorrow. So yeah, I would imagine, if I was just thinking from the media point of view, I would have
That's a great point.
Worries about hiding bad news tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Also, America is unique because we have politicians like Vivek, who is speaking directly about this SEC decision. If we go to the next slide, we can see he said the shadow government in DC, that's kind of what you were talking about there, Nolan, is out of control, and the federal courts are our only remaining line of defense. He says, let's keep Bitcoin innovation in the US instead of overseas. And on day one, he is going to take it to all of these people. So this Bitcoin is right in the thick of it. This decision has brought this topic to the mainstream media, to political candidates, to everything. And
truthfully,
Go ahead.
Bitcoin did it with the Assange thing, and to understand that the CIA and NSA were manufacturing news to begin with. Don't forget, Assange's entire thing was built on Bitcoin. So we already, Satoshi has got the closest to punching the three-letter agencies in the face and gathering all the benefits that comes with that than any other movement in the history of the world when you add it up. And we're right on top of them here with this one. And like you said, when change can come quick, I do expect the Supreme Court to make this decision that I mentioned, right? Which is going to say, basically, you can keep all these EPAs and all that, but you lose the judges. You lose the enforcement angle, because that's judgment. And you might get the regulation making power, fine, but it's got to sync with the separation of powers correctly. So you're setting the stage for dramatic revisal of the U.S. system, much like what we've said before, that everything you build from World War II, which was this bureaucratic adjudicative state inside, will be erased. It'll go back to the simpler times of a court and a regulatory body.
Yes, we are headed for some sort of hard fork to get all that technical debt out of the bureaucracy. All right, that's all I have for ETFs. Any other new things you want to talk about ETF before we move on?
No, that's thorough coverage, my friend. We're happy and excited to see what's happening, and it's one of the fun little games we can play while we're BTFDing.
All right, well, this is FedWatch, and the Fed had a big speech last Friday that we didn't get to cover because it came out. I don't need a slide yet, producer Chris. We'll talk about that next. So this was Jackson Hole. This is a big symposium there in Wyoming, right? Jackson Hole, Wyoming. The Kansas City Fed puts it on every year, and all the central bankers, who's who of central bankers, they come to the symposium and they talk about all their problems, maybe how to align their monetary policy. How does the Fed raising rates affect the ECB, so on and so forth. But everyone was there, and Powell had a big speech. Last year's speech was much more anticipated than this year's speech, but it was short and sweet. So I just wanted to give you some highlights. The main things that stuck out to me, he did his boilerplate about inflation, or fighting inflation. They have a dual mandate, yada, yada, yada. But then he reiterated very forcefully that they are sticking with the 2% target, because there's been a lot of talk about moving it to 3% and just letting it run hot at 3% or whatever. But no, he reiterated multiple times in the speech that 2% is the target and will remain the target. And then the last thing that stood out to me was this quote at the end of his speech. He said, "Navigating by the stars in cloudy skies." What would you say you do here, Jerome Powell? So, Nolan, what are your thoughts?
Well, I went with the interpretation of that, which is you're lost at sea. Because when are you?
They don't know what they're
lost at sea. I named my show that morning, "Lost at Sea." Powell admits Americans lost at sea, and I made a joke about it because one of my predictions always was that the Federal Reserve will destroy the Social Security and IRS system. They'll die. They were born together, and they will die together. And I've been thinking about that since I was originally orange pilled. And forget that's the next fight after the three-letter agencies. Then we get to the final boss. Yeah, the final bosses, right? So, but the first fights we get are these little guys, just the CIA. It's amazing that because that of course that's. If you buy that whole, not even if you buy it, if you think about how fiat works, of course, with they have to work together, because the only way you can run fiat debt is based on the birth certificate of people, right? So it's collateralized birth certificates, right? That's the system. It's birth certificate.
You're breaking up a little bit. Test.
Collateralizations. It's collateralized.
Yeah, we heard you there.
Yeah. So if you listen to all these people, they say that that's being lost at sea, right? That is the people who believe that Wizard of Oz version, right? And if people don't know, Wizard of Oz was actually based on that Tin Man and a Straw Man, and some people say Frank L. Baum was a populist interested in silver on gold, right?
Right.
They were not ruby red slippers, they were silver on gold. So that was the political atmosphere at the time. The line were the coward politicians who didn't want to go forward and all this stuff. But that was what they were warning against, that the Federal Reserve, if it was created paper money versus silver on gold, that it would have to come with the collateralization of birth certificates.
Interesting. We lost you again.
See, so that's how we can borrow all this money in your name. But we're also clearly lost at sea.
Yeah, I was thinking of monetary policy and quantitative easing. If it's quantitative, how can you be lost at sea? Right? You should be able to know exactly what your dial is set at, but somehow it's gone. I mean, these
so good.
It points out that these guys are all just trying to influence. They're trying to signal what they want. Yeah,
literal wizards, magicians.
Exactly.
Actual magic.
And I'm surprised
in magic.
I'm surprised that the markets didn't react really at all to this speech.
It's too much. It's too much for them. It's too much for you to for the guy to come out and basically say, look what he said this summer. We got nothing to worry about as long as we remain the bastion of the rule of law. He said that at the start of the summer, and now he's lost at sea. Okay.
Right.
This is another one of these people who looks like they're actually hostages, and they're trying to send smoke signals to people like, help, I'm lost at sea. It's great. You can't write a better script for how the Federal Reserve could have behaved this summer. This summer was as fruitful as the buy Bitcoin sign guy summer when he photobombed Yellen. This is better than that, because it's like an accumulation of major things, right? It's like 3 years ago, is Bitcoin center stage, right? And then, okay, now not only is it center stage, it's a shitty play. No one wants to see the play. They want to go somewhere else. And the Bitcoin guy's like, hey, let's go to karaoke or something. This sucks, right?
That's a good point. There is still a lot of apathy in the market. And maybe that's why we didn't see the price moon on this Grayscale decision, when it pretty much is guaranteeing that we're going to get a spot Bitcoin ETF relatively soon. Yet there's apathy in the market.
People are broke. I mean, that's all there is to it. Right?
Just,
people are broke, man. There was a lot less cash flow going around, both in the industry and just in general. So I'd say it's I've seen you're seeing these TikTok things go viral now. Is it worse than the Great Depression, what we're living through currently? So just doing the proportions, like things are rough out there. You still see it everywhere you go. I can't not see it, right? Even in small town America has homeless people now, like that. I don't remember ever seeing that in my life, like ever. Right? Ever, never, not even close. And not even in my life. 3 years ago, never, no such thing.
I mean, times are definitely tough. I think it's a stretch to compare it to bread lines and that kind of stuff during the Great Depression, but it is.
Yeah, but they didn't eat the sludge we have, so they didn't have. They didn't have industrial lubricant food yet, so
nutrition.
they had the disadvantage.
They actually had nutritional food.
Yeah, I understand why there were red lines when there was only food to eat and not dog food.
Doritos.
It made a difference. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's look at the odds of the Fed's next move, which is coming up on the 20th, and we will definitely be covering that here on FedWatch. 86% for no hike, and we're getting close to this meeting. So 86% no hike. I'm thinking there, of course, my theory is that they will always follow the market. So if this continues, there will be no hike. Things are starting to actually turn around. I didn't include this slide, but the 10-year yield is dropping after it peaked about 4.25%. It is back down, getting close to 0.08% this morning. So it's starting to fall again. And of course, rates fall when there is crisis on the horizon because people are rushing into bonds. But that is all I have for the Fed. We also got some PCE numbers out of the United States. Now, this is the Fed's preferred inflation indicator. And I put the numbers there at the top of the slide. So the core PCE deflator, which is pretty much what Powell looks at solely for inflation, quote unquote inflation, even though this is prices. Month on month, 0.22%, which annualized, is still above 2%, but it's below 3% annualized. If you go on a month on month, you annualize the month on month, but the year over year change is still up there at 4.2%. Headline came in at 3.3% year on year. And you can see that it was a little bit of an uptick like we saw in the CPI as well. But nothing that I'm seeing in the numbers is, saying that there is going to be a dramatic shift here in this downward trend. This is just a 1 month blip upwards. I mean, just look on the chart on the blue line. A few months back, we also had a little blip upward. A few months before that, we had a little blip upward and continued to fall. That's what I'm expecting here as well. Nolan, any thoughts on the Fed's upcoming meeting, raising, their policy, or the PCE numbers here?
I'm an accelerationist in many ways, so I want them to gun it. I want to see how far they're willing to go. So let them gun it. That's what I say.
Well,
I'm pulling for gunning it. Let's ram it. See how long it goes on for. Let's see. I want to see. That
makes me think of Tom Luongo, a friend of the show. We've interviewed him here on the past on FedWatch, and he was saying, "Oh, they're going to raise to 7%. They want to crush Davos." That was his thing. They want to crush Davos. There's this hard fork between Wall Street and the WEF. Wall Street wants to kick the WEF out. So they're going to raise rates. And my opinion was like yours. You're saying just rip the Band-Aid off. I was like, just raise it to 5% overnight. Like, why did they do a stair-step function if their goal was to wreck Davos? They would have just raised it right away. But so what are your thoughts? Do you think they are going to raise, or you don't think in those terms?
No, I do. I think in those terms. And I understand why they spend so much time doing it. It's part of their they can't be as overt as we would like them to be sometimes for reasons that we can all understand, right? Because human language is not perfect and all that stuff. Now, are they diametrically opposed to the socialist stuff of the WEF? Maybe. I mean, I wouldn't know, as long as I know that they understand this relationship, that the borrowing can't continue. We have to have a feedback loop for the system, that the system itself has not allowed any feedback loop. That's why it's been allowed to grow. That's why you end up with the unhealthy people telling you to be healthy and the sick people telling, that's why you end up like that, right? That's the fiat trap. So I'd say, yeah, there's people in the Federal Reserve. You even mentioned the Jackson Hole thing. Like I dealt directly with the Federal Reserve of Kansas City when I worked with Kraken. There were people inside there that loved what we were doing. Now Kraken's got to sue them. I don't think they got an invite to Wyoming this year. Because Caitlin Long and all them. I'm not sure if Kraken's involved in the case, but it's the same problem, right? There's people inside that just they don't see the same on the inside, right? I dealt with the people there that were totally into it. And so it is like that, right? There's no monolithic way they're all looking at it, but it does sound to me like what you're saying. Jerome Powell is signaling things that are huge, and there could be something at the scale of that, right? Of the WEF and all that, for sure.
Yeah. Yep. We all have our own slight conspiracy theories. That is mine. I think that it's Wall Street versus the WEF. So, okay, let's go on to the next story. Speaking of the WEF and Europe, I guess Davos is in Switzerland, not in Germany. But this is a story that just came up this morning from a German language news outlet. And German companies are fleeing abroad en masse. If we go to the next slide, I picked out a few big points from this article here. 43% of all industrial companies with more than 500 employees are considering relocating their capacities abroad. Let's see, only 6.7% said in a survey they plan to do so at 17%, the measures for this are already underway, and another 19.7% said they were already realizing it. This means that 36.7% of larger industrial companies are currently packing their bags to flee abroad. Over a third of the industrial companies in Germany are leaving. That's what this article says. That's what this survey of, it was like 5,000 companies. If we go to the next slide, we got some more from this same article. So yeah, 3,500 companies that they surveyed on a scale from negative 100 to positive 100. What would they rate the the impact of the climate policy on their business? And it's at minus 27% on average. Then if you break it down a little bit more, so industrial companies, it's minus 38, from negative 100 to 100 scale. Energy intensive industry, minus 55. Last year, this index was still at a minus 7 across all sectors. So it went from minus 7 to minus 55 for these energy intensive things. This quote is, the crash is really extreme. Nolan, what's up?
What it looks like is a bunch of people made choices, not thinking about this. Doesn't, when it's so dramatic, it's not a trend, right? This looks like they were faced with a stark reality and choices were made. And when choices are made, it's not the same as how do I feel like things are going, right? So yeah, here we are with a bunch of choices, and this is the feedback loop that fiat doesn't allow for in a normal way, and forces out with these cataclysms, because this is catastrophic. I mean, absolutely. If this isn't the number one story in Germany, nothing else should be. But I'm sure it's not. I'm sure they're worried about migrants, or they're worried about something someone said on a show and they were rude to somebody. It's the same as America, I bet, right? If you go on the news, somebody said something and then this person was offended, and that's all the news. And meanwhile, we got hot war, we got all kinds of stuff. So Germany has its own, probably a similar amount of low awareness stuff going on. And this should be this is the most important thing in Germany today. And absolutely. I bet they don't know about it. I bet they don't know anything about it.
Yeah, not unless you are affected directly by this. But a lot of people are. If we go to the next slide, they mention in here this, what is it? Let me read here. It's the Building Energy Act and the Energy Efficiency Act. These are two things that were passed a couple years ago, I think, that make it so you have to change out your heating system or something in your house. And it could cost up to 20 or 30,000 euros to do this per house. And now it's gone into effect. Everybody is affected by this immediately. This insane decision that was made years down, in the past. A big thing from this right here, I just wanted to pull out this quote. So 67% of companies with 250 to 500 employees cite excessive bureaucracy and regulation as the biggest obstacle.
I gotta say, I've been waiting for these, because when it started, remember they said no gas cars in Los Angeles by 2025. I was like, it can't come soon enough. Like, let's go. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? So I'm glad these things are starting to come. And when they're like, oh, but we said 10 years ago, we sent an email. We published it. How come it didn't happen?
One thing I've been saying is that you can't change physical reality. So even if these Davos types want to change and create their future, they still have to obey physical reality. And that's what they're running up against right now. I think it's crazy. But as you said there a second ago about, I can't remember exactly what you had mentioned, but you made me think of the AfD. So this is a right conservative party in Germany that is anti-NATO, anti-EU, and anti-Euro. And this is their latest numbers. If you go to the next slide, you can see that the AfD has gone, well, you said it was overnight. Well, it kind of is. AFD was around 9-10% in elections and in the polls, but overnight they've jumped up to 20%. And I bet this continues to accelerate. I bet they become the largest political party in Europe within the next few months. I think that is what's going to happen.
And I think they've already got the benefit of getting some suppression this week. Like they tried to ban them and censor them this week, like overtly. They were not. It was like a Canadian
really?
style, like you can't talk, if you disagree with us at all. So there was a massive attempt at censorship of the AFD all week, but I believe it failed. But if it didn't, all the better. They're going to get more support. I think that's where a lot of the support came from this censorship tactic.
Oh yeah, I agree with it. The more you try to censor it at this point, the just more attention it gets, the more popular it gets. Look at Trump, as he is getting indicted, his poll numbers go up. So as they censor AFD, their poll numbers are going to go up most likely. But yeah, it does not look good for Germany. I think an economic implosion could be coming in a very near future. And if they go to an anti-EU political stance, what happens to the EU? I mean, this could snowball extremely quickly.
We love it. Let's go.
I mean, you already have Meloni. You already have Meloni in Italy, and Le Pen.
Wouldn't hesitate. And the French will be fine on their own. It doesn't matter. There's people in France that still only use the franc psychologically. You know that?
No.
They continue to translate the price into francs. They will not participate. They won't. They won't.
That's funny.
They won't participate. They'll find a way. They still have to pay in euros, but they will not think of the euro price. Right. They only want the franc price. And there are places that still will label the franc price and not the euro price for their benefit.
Wow.
There's like people who fought for those rights.
Wow.
Strangely, they were the same people. There used to be an old franc, and they used to have 2 listings of prices for them as well. So they just inherited that like 2 price listing system.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, Europe could really snowball here. And when I could think about the next, like say 12 months and Europe snowballing, China snowballing, where's all that money going to go? Most likely a lot of it's going to find its way into Bitcoin, but I think most of it is going to find its way into US markets. So that's very bullish, for my opinion, for the US. But that's all I have for this. I have one more story. We got 3 minutes. Let's see if we can cover this really quick. If we go to the next slide. So there has been another military coup in Africa, this time in Gabon, I think you say, or Gabon. Military officers announced on television channel Gabon 24 that election results were canceled, borders closed, and state institutions, including the Senate, National Assembly, and Constitutional Court, were dissolved overnight. And this is a statement from the military. They said, "In the name of the Gabonese people, we have decided to defend the peace by putting an end to the current regime. We call on the population for calm and serenity." And if you go to the next slide, this is a map of all the recent coups that have happened since 2020 in Africa. And one of my theses, or parts of my thesis here of the U.S. withdrawing from the world, is we're going to see more and more of this stuff going on. People think you get the evil United States out, it's going to be rainbows and sunshine and prosperity for everyone. But no, when you withdraw from the global hegemonic order of the U.S. being a policeman or peacekeeper, so to speak, you're going to get all these types of revolts and coups. So Nolan, what are your thoughts?
There is one counter to that. And while I would have agreed probably 100% with your sentiment just a few years ago, but COVID and being a Bitcoiner has taught us a little different. And, we see the U.S. presence being withdrawn, but a lot of these leaders, now I don't know each of them, I don't know every one of these cases, but I bet some of them anyway, were choices that were made in America to begin with, and the regimes that were there were likely constituted from an old world order where America did say who was the leader of these fake democracies. And so the institutions are gone, sure. But whoever's there, we can't just jump. Like, I don't know anything about it, like zero, right? But my suspicion is, now I know some of these are French, but very similar, right? We've known what they've done with the money for a long time, right? It's atrocious what the French central bank does to those places, and so I don't know about every one of these ones again, but I suspect in some cases what we don't know is who the good guys or bad guys are in any of these conflicts, I guess is what I'm coming at. And we can't just go and assume that the US going out is the removal of the good guy police officer, right?
Absolutely not.
Like it's the opposite, right?
Absolutely not. But it is the removal of an expectation of a certain order. When we're changing the rules have changed, and we're not in the post World War II hegemonic order anymore. We are in a lawless order. And so, the US could be a bad guy. The US could be a good guy. You know, Russia could be financing somebody. China could be financing somebody. Who knows? But the point is that the institutions that kept the peace relatively are gone. And so we're not going to see that peace. There is no rule of international law anymore.
And it even exactly on that, it doesn't look like any of these people are shy about it like they might have been once. You know, you might have got the entire attention of the United States a couple of years ago if you were just the one African country, but now it's happening all over the world. And so there is no like Gabon, like add it to the list, you know. Like, I don't even know which one. I don't know how, like I can't differentiate why the president was arrested for, like I can't keep the 4 of the cases separate. Like there should be a prize to name those alone. Right. And now African countries with coups, like that's a whole, it's a game show into of itself. Like there's a lot going on here. Right. So there's too much information, but it's happening fast. And maybe it's my own orange lenses, but I see Bitcoin, interacting with every one of these global events in some of the most interesting and consequential ways. We're right there. You know,
well, happening. Bitcoin is definitely like a point of clarity that we can all look to and see. We know what Bitcoin is. We know what value it has. So that's all I have for today, Nolan. Any closing thoughts, or do you want to plug your show one more time?
Yeah, just I'll plug this show again. Love joining you guys every Thursday. It's a fun time. 12:30. Let us know. We were talking a little bit of Friday, changing the day. We changed the dates before, but if you ever want to leave comments here, we're talking about it. But we're happy in the time slot we're in right now. Fridays are a good vibe though, as we get into different weather in the autumn. You know, maybe this is a Friday vibe. You know, we can fit into the Friday afternoon thing. But that's not important. Otherwise, you can catch me every day at 8 a.m. on Rumble, on my own personal YouTube, CountBTC on YouTube. We also repost it every day on Nostr for all you guys who like Nostr. Trying to get the Zap. You should get on this too, Ansel. When I figure it out, I'll share it with you. But how to broadcast to the Zap stuff using your browser extension. I haven't been able to quite figure it out. I did it. I think I've been broadcasting at least one day. Went on to Nostr live with the show, but it broke the Rumble rebroadcast. So I've had to reset everything and sort of start fresh. But there you go. 8 a.m. every day except Sunday, Eastern time. The breakup. Join us. It's a lot of fun.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining FedWatch. I'm Ansel Lindner. Check out bitcoinandmarkets.com for more of my stuff, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.